So Jeff is a mentor for awakened organisations, and he's a guide for the journey of coming home to who we truly are, individually and collectively. He sees the enlightened potential of people and systems, and is passionate about helping clients to find their way in these transformational times. So over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, everyone, for being here in Zoom, in the Zoom room, or on Facebook, wherever you may be in the world. I know some people are up quite late. So I would like to enjoy this shift from prophet to prophecy and celebrate the possibilities that are ahead. And as I was literally dreaming into the topic for today, I became curious about what is unity anyway. And then I wrote down a number of definitions, and of course I Googled, but it felt most appropriate, since we're talking about prophecy, to reach into the future and reach deep into consciousness and listen for what might be a working definition that I could use. So here's what I received. Unity is the differentiated totality in which every element, every being, and all of the gross, subtle, and extremely subtle energies fit together seamlessly and coexist harmoniously through knowing the indivisibility of all that is. So I know that's quite a few words, but there's unity and there's diversity in this unity, and fundamentally it's the so-called parts fit together and all are required. And there are examples from wisdom traditions. There are the seeds for this enlightened potential that have existed for millennia. So the Mayans had a word in Lakesh: you are my other self, we are one, I am another yourself. Thich Nhat Hanh more recently coined the word interbeing, and that means everything relies on everything else in order to manifest. And the Bantu peoples in Africa have the word Ubuntu, which you've probably heard. I am because we are is one of the common translations. So I'm going to share my screen because there are a few slides. I promise not to overdo it with slides, but there are a few that would be helpful. And let's see if I can make this scroll better. Okay, so I was also curious, what are the signs today that already exist that are pointing to where we're going? What is the direction of evolution's arrow? And I'm involved in a lot of different conversations and a lot of different communities. I've spent a lot of time working with organizations furthering the compassion movement and social justice, and that is especially essential right now. And so I've been aware that restorative justice has been emerging quite strongly for the last decade plus. And that's a shift away from punitive justice, where there is a sense of retribution and punishment. And the next shift is toward unitive justice. And there actually is a definition of unitive justice. It's new, but it exists. And there's a website you can go to, which is unitivejustice.com. And they say the nature of unitive justice is that it is a values-based system that has no punitive elements. It replaces hierarchy, judgment, and punishment with inclusion, connection, and mutually beneficial action. It embodies loving kindness. So imagine a justice system that embodies loving kindness. That's a unitive justice model. And then in communities and organizations of all types, there's been an evolution of consciousness from fierce competition, and that is predicated on a belief in separation and scarcity and needing to get ahead and maybe crush the competition, how horrific sounding these days, to cooperation, to collaboration, to co-creation even. And with each step, with each evolution, there's less of a sense of separation and more of a sense of our togetherness. And where does that lead? To the ultimate togetherness, which is unity. So there's a unitive model for working together where we know ourselves as one system. A friend of mine who's a non-dual spiritual teacher asks people, do you realize there's only one thing going on? And when we know that, the whole nature of our engagement with one another shifts, and we can have diversity, and we can also have synergy, and we can be without conflict in our interactions and hyper efficient. Imagine a business without conflict, without drama, without having to fight within its own walls, let alone with others outside. So again, the shift to unity. And so there's a pattern here. It's not just an isolated occurrence that people in social justice are talking about unity. No, we talk about unity in business increasingly. So a friend of mine, Steve Farrell, has an organization called Humanities Team. Claire Chapman on this call knows it very well. And he writes about 3 waves of conscious business. And in his articulation, B Corps were the first wave. So multiple bottom lines, people, planet, profit. And so we have 3 Ps. The next wave is conscious capitalism, which brings in more of a framework and includes higher purpose. So now we have a 4th P. And we're fortunate indeed that people are embracing conscious capitalism now. It's actually becoming mainstream. And the next stage, revolution in business, is not yet mainstream, but we could talk about awakened business. And Steve brings in the word presence, and he talks about oneness and this pervading spirit. And not everyone in business is ready to go there, but increasingly people are. And when we do, when we get into the foundations, the energetic and spiritual consciousness foundations of an organization, we get into the roots, we get into unity. So we can talk about unitive business. And there is a conscious business declaration. This presentation, which you're looking at, will be shared, so you can click on the links. You'll have access to everything. I do want to read to you the final point in the conscious business declaration, which kind of summarizes this particular segment. So when aligned with oneness, we could substitute unity. There are distinctions, but let's leave it as is. When aligned with oneness, business is the most powerful engine on earth for creating prosperity and flourishing for all. So a thriving world is possible when business gets engaged, when business gets in the game, and it is happening. Conversations like this are proof, and it's a movement. It's a worldwide movement. So then I asked the question meditatively, what can business do for you? Unity. What can business do for you? And that is demonstrate interbeing. So business has the capacity to test out models and ways of doing things and embody a multidimensional exchange of value that shows how inextricably connected we are to one another. The inputs and the outputs fit together seamlessly. Again, it's unity. And it's only limited consciousness that can't see the system dynamics, but that's okay, because we're becoming more aware, and we're becoming better at spotting the system's dynamics and inequalities and injustices and repairing them. Another thing, important contribution that business can make. Business is great at distributing whatever it might be, in this case, consciousness. So in embodying these principles that we're talking about, business emanates and it distributes without trying to do so. It is distributing new consciousness, and it's sort of like the 100th monkey. People just naturally start to get it. There's a kind of coherence that grows. And so not everyone has to study this stuff. It'll just be the way we do things. It'll become obvious. And then we have the ability to co-create at scale, a world that works. And now we know that a world that works is by definition a world that works for all. Buckminster Fuller introduced some of this language decades ago, and finally it's taking root. So the seeds of the future, the fulfillment of the prophecies, has its roots in what exists today, and we can choose which seeds to water. And we can, and business will, heal the structures of society. I was extremely heartened to have dinner with a friend last year, and he shared with me that he has an upcoming book with Raj Sisodia, who was one of the founders of the conscious capitalism movement. And this book is titled, and now it's out, The Healing Organization, awakening the conscience of business to help save the world. So it's happening. It's getting easier and easier to prophesize that the future is bright, and the future of business is humane and highly successful. And it will be successful across all the P's, which includes profit. But increasingly, an organization won't be profitable unless it is loving. And some of you have heard me quote before, his name is not with me in this moment, but he said that if your business isn't talking about love by 2030 or sooner, you won't be in business. So that is the direction that we're going. And then the final opportunity for business to feed unity, as it were, is to implement the principles of true economy. So this is something that I received and I'll share with you. And I hold it lightly. I'm not saying it has to be this way exactly, but I was listening back in March and April for what does a supremely awake economy look like? How does it function? How does it feel? How does it taste? And in that moment, for whatever reason, I wasn't really interested in an incrementally more conscious economy. I wanted to know, where does this process, this human experiment, this experiment of business ecosystems finding their way holistically, where does it lead? And so the phrase that came to me is a true economy. And then I felt that it's not even fair to talk about an economy that doesn't serve all, that doesn't meet basic needs. Is that really an economy? It seems to me more a punishment. So back to unity and unitive principles. I won't read everything here. You'll have access to this afterwards, after the presentation. But the first principle that came to me is that ecosystems are the anchor assets. The foundation for any economy is the health of the planet and the ecosystems. And so those are the real assets that we're cultivating. And then there's a leveling out so that businesses actually are designed to eliminate the unhealthy inequalities. And that'll be a conversation, what constitutes healthy, what constitutes unhealthy. But what I saw in the visionary state is that everyone's basic needs are met on an on, but also that the definition of basic needs expands to include not only food, shelter, water, a safe place to raise your kids, but creativity, the ability to have time to explore one's spiritual dimensions, to create art and express one's soul purpose and calling. So that's actually a basic need, and that is necessary for fulfillment. Now, generosity, I feel that is probably fairly self-evident, but actually when we withhold, somehow the whole system grinds to a halt. And so when the generosity is present, then there's circulation. We value ourselves. So when we appreciate our own immense contribution and really see that it is immense, not something micro, then our relationship to this true economy can be quite different. It's easier to be generous. It's easier to not even contemplate scarcity. So it's a totally different mode when we truly value ourselves and our own infinite nature. So a few more. Do what you love. This is interesting. I was in conversation with a friend who started a business called Love To, and one of the founding premises is if everyone actually does what they love, it will work. And there's a lot more to say about how that can actually manifest, but there's a lot of clear thinking around doing what you love. And then the energy that you bring, that we bring to whatever it is that we're doing from love is powerful and empowering. It's luminous, and it actually brings in new consciousness. So then life equals value equals life. There's not value that is separate from life. I hope that's fairly clear. And if we're going to measure, because there's the statement, what gets measured gets, oh, that's funny. Well, anyway, it grows. So we are cultivating health by measuring it, interestingly enough. And we're measuring the health of ecosystems and whole communities and individuals, as well as the health of businesses, which can be assessed according to the bottom line and in these other holistic ways. I also saw that money makes a kind of spiral as it orbits through systems. And each time it goes around, it uplifts. And then finally, we're cultivating wealth in a deep sense. And we're protecting people and ecosystems. And the result of all of this is mutually assured thriving. So the structures, I'll read this, the structures of a true economy strongly favor activities and interactions that benefit all and harm no one. And the thriving of one requires the thriving of all, and a healthy whole requires healthy individuals. So business is going to bring about this vision. And we get to live that, and we get to co-create this destiny. And I would be delighted to be on this journey with you today and answer further questions as we move into the plenary session later. So thank you, everyone. I am grateful for this opportunity.